What's up, you sweaty nerds and greasy degenerates? Luka and Kafka are almost here, less than a week away. The golden hour is almost upon us, so let's get hyped and let's talk about how to build Luka, because he's coming out real soon and he's going to pair really well with Kafka if you decide to choose to put Luka with Kafka. So let's talk about it. We're going to be talking about two different ways to build Luka based on his Ascension level 6 ability. When he has his enhanced basic attack active, he'll actually be able to deal 2 additional attacks if we have his effect hit rate high enough. And we would need 67% extra effect hit rate in order to be able to do that. Otherwise, we only need 10.2% effect hit rate. So my suggestion is actually to build Luka for attack percent rather than effect hit rate, but I'm going to talk about both for you. Be aware this is a pre-release build guide, so if you wanted to know more about Luka's skills and abilities in detail, I do have a video for that I made yesterday. You can find it down below in the description or in the pinned comment. Alright, now let's talk about the different light cones we can put onto Luka, and we're going to be focused on two main things here. That is Luka's attack percent build, and then there's also the effect hit rate build for Luka. And I'm going to mention what I think are the best in slots for those different conditions. However, if you don't have one of the light cones I mentioned here for his best in slot, just remember that any of the light cones I will mention here will still work on Luka no matter how you build him. Now let's talk about Good Night and Sleep Well. I think this is Luka's best in slot for his attack percent version. Of course it will work for his effect hit rate version too, but I think this is the best one for attack percent. Now let's go ahead and talk about why. For every debuff the target enemy has, the damage dealt by the wearer increases by 12%, stacking up to 3 times. This effect also applies to DOT. So if you have 3 stacks, this will go up to 36% at base level. However, this is part of the gacha system, so you have to get lucky to get this cone, and if you don't get lucky, you might not even have this cone. And you need to get lucky if you want to get this cone superimpositioned up to superimposition 5. So just something to remember there. Unfortunately, his best in slot cones are part of the gacha system, so you will have to get lucky to get the cones. This cone is also Kafka's second best cone. So if you don't have Kafka's signature cone, you're probably going to want to use this on Kafka instead if you have it. So just something to think about there. Good Night and Sleep Well is a very good cone. Now let's talk about Eyes of the Prey. I love Eyes of the Prey because this is his second best cone in my opinion, no matter which build you're doing for him. It's not quite his best version, but no matter how you build him, it's basically his second best in my opinion. And it increases the wearer's effect hit rate by 20% and increases the DOT by 24%. This is super easy to understand. It increases both his effect hit rate and his DOT, easy to explain as well. Eyes of the Prey, very good cone. It's also part of the gacha system, so just be aware of that. Now let's talk about some runner-up cones before we talk about, one of his best cones. Now, In the Name of the World there's a problem with In the Name of the World for Luka. So let's go ahead and talk about why. It increases the wearer's damage to debuffed enemies by 24%. When the wearer uses their skill, the effect hit rate for this attack increases by 18% and the attack increases by 24%. Now that first part's fine, but the second part here only works if you're using his skill every single turn. But Kafka's probably going to be on your Luka team. I'm telling you guys this information with the assumption that Kafka is also on your Luka team. Kafka's going to be the one using her skill every turn, not Luka. Luka has a skill that applies a DOT to the enemy. After he applies that DOT, he's going to want to switch back to his basic attack so that he can use his enhanced basic attack and use that instead for at least a few turns. So you're not going to be getting the second part of this effect very often with this on Luka. You'd probably rather have this on, Sampo or on Kafka rather than Luka. So just be aware of that. If you have it lying around, and maybe go for it, but I wouldn't go buying that from the Starlight shop just so you can put it onto Luka. There's better cones like Fermata. Fermata is craftable in the Forgotten Hall system, so go ahead and craft this. If you literally have no other choices and you don't have a cone to put on Luka, just go craft this. Because this does still work. again, this is another cone that unfortunately works better on Kafka and Sampo rather than Luka, but it still works on Luka. It increases the break effect dealt by the wearer by 16%, and increases their damage to enemies afflicted with shock or wind shear by 16%. This also applies to DOT. So something to remember is that Luka does not use shock or wind shear. So that's why this is a kind of bottom of the barrel light cone for Luka. It still works on his DOTs, still gives him good break effect, and you can get this to Superimposition 5 really easily, so that number increases to 32% for each pretty easily. So I would use Fermata if you have nothing else to use. I'm going to mention this one really quickly, but I wouldn't use this cone. Don't use before the tutorial mission starts. It does increase his effect hit rate up to 40% when it's Superimposition 5, and it gives him a whole bunch of energy, so he gets his ultimate off really often. But it doesn't give him any damage, and that's not going to be, and it doesn't give him any extra DOT damage, so I wouldn't use this cone if I was you. I would skip that cone and use Fermata in a worst case scenario. Now let's talk about his best in slot cone for his effect hit rate build. This is not a good cone for his attack percent build. This is a good cone for his effect hit rate build. Something to remember there, because he needs effect hit rate for this to work properly. So, resolution shines as pearls of sweat. When the wearer hits an enemy, and if the hit enemy is not already ensnared, then there is a 60% base chance to ensnare the hit enemy. Ensnared enemy's defense decreases by 12% for 1 turn. So, this synergizes really well with his Ascension 6. Ascension 6, when using Luka's enhanced basic attack, every attack direct punch deals has a 60% base chance for Luka to use 1 additional attack. This effect does not apply to additional attacks, aka follow-up attacks. So, that works really well because they have the exact same amount of base chance. If you can increase Luka's effect hit rate high enough, you will be able to get both of these cracking off every single time. So that's really strong, but it only works really well on the effect hit rate version of Luka. I can't stress that enough. It's his best in slot, in my opinion, for the effect hit rate version, but only for the effect hit rate version, so keep that in mind. Alright, now let's talk about some relics for Luka. If you are building Luka around attack percent or effect hit rate, we will be going over both. And pretty obvious choice here, you go for the physical set with the physical character, because that's the type of damage that he's going to be dealing, but not just because it's the set that goes with him. He also gets the attack buff here. You can go with a split build where you use 2 pieces of the physical set, the boxing set, and you can go for a 2-piece of the musketeer set, but you simply aren't going to get as much attack percent out of it, so I would not personally do that. If I was you, I would use the boxing set, also known as the physical set, in my humble opinion. And of course you have, flat attack on your gloves, flat HP on the headpiece, so it's mostly important to focus on his body piece, the boots, and the planar ornaments. And with the body piece, I would go for attack percent, because DOTs are highly focused on attack percent, not on things like crit rate. You can go for crit rate on your substat, that's fine, but in my opinion it's best to go for attack percent first. That way your DOTs work properly. So I'd go for attack percent on the main stat, then attack percent substat and speed, as well as break effect, and then depending on how you build your Luka, you might want effect hit rate. If you're building the effect hit rate Luka, you do want to have effect hit rate as a very important substat. You want to be hyper focused on effect hit rate for your substats when you are building the effect hit rate version of Luka. If you aren't building for the effect hit rate version of Luka and you're going for an attack percent Luka that's highly focused on damage, then that last slot is a flex slot. You can go for crit rate, you can go for crit damage, you can go for, if you feel like you need defense, that last slot will be a flex slot if you are going for the attack percent version of Luka. So something to be aware of. If you are building for the effect hit rate version, you actually, a perfect roll would be attack percent, main stat, attack percent, substat, speed, break effect, and then also effect hit rate. That's like a perfect roll for Luka in my opinion, but if you are going for the DPS version, the attack percent version, that last slot you want to forget about the break effect and you want to go for like crit rate. That's going to be the best thing you can do for the damage version. And with the planar spheres for Luka, you're going to want to focus on getting the Herta's space station, or actually it's the space ceiling station set, but it's going to be the Herta's space station planar sphere, and it's going to be the Herta's Wandering Trek link rope. Now that's only if you're going for the attack percent Luka. If you want to go for the effect hit rate Luka, you're going to want to go for the IPC trade route link rope, and I believe it's called the IPC Mega HQ Planar Sphere. They do two completely different things. Let's go ahead and go over it. With Herta's Space Station, the two-piece increases the wearer's attack by 12%, and when the wearer's speed reaches 120 or higher, the wearer's attack increases by an extra 12%. This is very good because we want Luka's attack percent to be really, really high, and we also want to build him for speed as well, so we should be hitting this 120% speed so that we get that extra 12% off of it. A total of 24% attack off of just the bonus itself. And you want to go for probably physical damage when you're building for Luka. So physical damage, main stat, and then the same things as before. Attack percent, speed, break effect, and then like I said, if you want to go for effect hit rate, you shouldn't be going for this planar sphere in the first place. So you probably want to go for crit rate as that last slot for the Herta Space Station planar sphere and for the rope. But if you're going for effect hit rate, you want to be using the IPC trade route stuff because the two-piece increases the wearer's effect hit rate by 10%. Meanwhile, the wearer's attack increases by an amount that is equal to 25% of the current effect hit rate up to a maximum of 25%. And with this particular rope, you might want to go for a rope and planar sphere. Again, same stuff, you know, physical damage, attack percent, break effect, speed, and if you're going for the effect hit rate build of Luka, then go for the effect hit rate on the substat as well. And that's my suggestion for you. If you have the availability to go for crit rate on this as well, go for it, but don't forget the speed, attack percent, break effect, and effect hit rate when building the effect hit rate build. Now let's talk about some team compositions. I'm going to put a link to this post right here in the pinned comment and in the description. This is a graphic that somebody else made, and I want to point out here that if you are of course building a Luka team, of course you're also building Kafka as well. So Luka and Kafka, they pair together, that's just how it goes. So now you're mainly focused on whether you have a certain healer or a support, or even have Sampo, Luka, and Kafka on the same team. Some people might want to run 3 DOTs at the same time. I haven't personally been able to run the numbers. Let's not forget Luka isn't out yet. So it's a little, and Kafka's not out yet either. So it's a little hard to know this 100% definitively. But when the character does come out, we're going to want to try Sampo, Luka, and Kafka at the same time to test out to find out what's better, having 3 DOTs or having a support and 2 DOTs. Now for the support slot, Asta works really well, but I actually really like Ting Yun as well, because Ting Yun gives you a better attack buff, and so you'll probably be dealing more damage off of Ting Yun instead. Asta is really great for the speed, but if your entire team has speed built on them already, you might not need Asta's speed buff. So potentially consider Ting Yun as well, and of course Pela and Silverwolf are great because they're going to debuff the enemy, making your DOTs deal increased damage. You can't go wrong with the support slot here, really. And with the healer slot, Bailu is really, really great. Locha is really, really, really great. I consider them both to probably be as good because Locha basically means you don't die. And Japard is similar as well. You basically can't die with Japard on your team as well. So something to consider. But if you don't have any of these, Natasha does work too. So don't forget that she has a pretty good break effect as well. Her break effect is actually pretty strong and will work really good on a DOT team. So you can use Natasha if you don't have anybody else. If this video was helpful to you in any way, shape, or form, maybe leave a like and subscribe. If it wasn't, I'm sorry I suck ass. Leave a hate thread in the comments. I'll catch you next time. Peace.